It says live video is starting.
Oh, that would be amazing.
I'm just, it occurred to me. It seems like I'm on.
Let me go to that page.
Yeah, could you go to the Waco Wetlands, not your
Yeah,
page?
yes, you are on.
I am on.
Aha,
Oh, welcome.
beautiful.
Hey, awesome.
There
It
you
worked.
are. Okay, I'm gonna hang up and listen. You could start talking.
Let me see if I have anybody on. Well, I only have one viewer, and that must be you. Um,
Yeah, but it's gonna record it, so you want to start from the beginning
but
and introduce
Dave,
yourself.
Dave, would you mind going to the to your page, to the Green K, and alerting people to the fact that I'm on this one?
Yes, I will do that.
Okay,
Okay,
thank
I'm
you.
gonna hang up though because it's getting the echo. I hear it online.
Okay, great. Hey, folks.
Okay, good, Pedro. Have fun,
I'll do
and
my best.
I'll watch you.
Hey,
Bye.
folks, welcome to the class. Sorry, we were having a little bit of technical difficulties here. For some reason, when we tried to start the class in the Green K page, it kept crashing. So we had to basically come back to the Waco page, and miracles. This page is working perfectly, and I see that I have 13 viewers. So thank you to those folks that are online, and I hope we get some more. I see the hellos below, so thank you very much for being on. The topic of this class is is an introduction to bird photography, and I'll be talking, as we said in the class description, about your cameras. We'll also be talking about lenses, and we're going to be talking about settings, meaning how do we set up a camera so that it can successfully capture birds in the wild. I think number one, I would like to cover some definitions and some motivations for doing this. And in the definitions part, I want to make sure that we all are kind of on the same table as to what a camera is, what photography is, what a lens is, so that when I'm referring to these terms, you know what I am thinking in my head these things mean. Number one, I think the first definition I want to tackle is what is the motivation to do this? And to me, the motivation to do this is quite simple. Is the enjoyment of nature and sharing that enjoyment with others. That's what it is to me. When I get out there, I'm actually really happy that I just made it out there. To me, being at Waco or Green K is kind of a peaceful place, a place where I feel good. And if I take a great picture, well, that's fantastic, and I can share that with others. But just the fact alone that I made it there is already to me an achievement, and it's already made my day, even if I take a good picture or not. So to me, the motivation is get out of your house, get off the couch, and get out there, walk, and see some of the beauty that is in nature. So that's motivation number one. The other thing that I want to get out of the way early on is rules. Photography is an art form, in my opinion, and as such, there really are no rules as far as the art itself. As long as what you're getting pleases you and you find it beautiful, then that's cool. Um, I think the only rule that I can think of in photography that holds steady all over the planet is called the rule of F16. And just please write that down so that you can Google it later. But basically, the rule of F16 says that the correct exposure for any sunlit environment is F16, meaning the lens clones down, and 1 over the ISO. So for example, if you have ISO 200, the correct settings would be 1/200 at F16, or anything equivalent to that, meaning F16 would be 200 for the ISO 200, F11 would be 400, F8 would be 800, F56 would be 1600, and F4 would be 3200. I don't know if you kept up with that, but just Google it and save it. It's a very useful rule because since it holds all over the planet and it's the same for all cameras, if your camera were ever to malfunction, you'd be able to see if the malfunction is something associated with your meter simply by knowing what the rule of F16 says, because your camera auto meter in full sunlight at the rule of F16. But it's going back to rules. There's really no rules as to how you do your image making. I do feel strongly, though, that there's a couple rules that we need to play by when we are in the wetlands, and that's number one, have respect for the place. It's a wonderful place. It's a real haven. Unfortunately, we have nothing like that down here in Miami-Dade. As far as I know, we have nothing like that in Broward. So it's a real unique opportunity. It's a gift to us that we're able to enjoy Waco Green K. It kind of bothers me and it upsets me when I see trash rubbish in the water, in the wetland. I know sometimes it's an accident, so it's cool, but do your best not to leave a mark. You're a visitor, as such, behave as a visitor. Meaning, be nice about it. So number one, have respect for the place. Have respect for the animals. If you see that your presence is causing discomfort to an animal, back off. It's just common sense. If an animal is doing an activity and you're disturbing that activity, you are creating harm. So, please be mindful of that. And then, just like you need to respect the place and you need to respect the wildlife that is present there, I think the other rule is respect for everybody who goes there. We're blessed here in South Florida to live in a multicultural, multiracial society, and I think also multicultural, multi-ethnic, also multi-religion. So we need to be very mindful of that, and I think there's no place in the wetlands for any sort of aggressive comments regarding anybody's faith or anybody's background. If you feel that those thoughts are good for you, I have no issue with that, but don't share them. Okay, so no, there should be no place for anti-Semitism or any sort of racism in the wetland. It's just a haven, and let's keep it that way. I think it's so much better when we do that. So enough about the rules. No rules as far as the artistic side. You got to do it in a way that pleases you and that produces an outcome that you find meaningful to you. I had a teacher once tell me that there's a simple rule of thumb. If you hold your thumb out there and you look at it, if the only person meant to enjoy your photography is from the thumb in, meaning you and the person next to you, you really don't care what other folks are thinking. Now, if all of a sudden you want your photographs to be appreciated by those beyond your thumb, then now all of a sudden you have to worry about the aesthetics of what you're creating and that they be pleasing to others. And that's kind of where I'm at. I need to make sure that not only it pleases me, I want to make sure that the viewers also find enjoyment in the images that I take. And so to do that, we need to follow certain conventions. And what I would say about that is that most people expect when they look at an image, they want to see good detail, they want to see good color, they want to see good light, they want to see good composition. So all of those elements need to come together in your image so that people find it compelling and something to look at. I think one simplistic way to say it is that you would like your image to be beautiful. But even there we get into trouble, because as soon as you go to a definition of beauty, there is no standard definition of beauty. It kind of is different for different cultures. And there's that old saying, that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, meaning it's not necessarily external, it's more of an internal thing. And I do tend to believe that beauty is more of an internal thing, and I don't think it's made up of attributes. To me, the attributes are a symptom of beauty, but it's not the beauty itself. How do I know if something is beautiful or not? I think it's really quite simple. To me, beauty is felt, it's not observed. If I don't feel it here, it's not beautiful. It could be perfect, it could be symmetrical, it could be colorful, it could have all the attributes. But if all the attributes together don't impact me here in this area, then there is no beauty there. The beauty is felt, not just seen. So enough about those definitions. The next definitions I want to cover is the definitions that pertain to the presentation. And the first definition I want to talk about is the definition of what is to photograph something. What is photography? Photography is a compound word that actually comes from two Greek roots. The first is photo, and photo refers to light, to that which allows you to see me. If this room was totally dark, you would not be able to see me. You're able to see me because light from the light sources in this room is hitting my face, my glasses, and this light is reflecting towards the camera, which is what you folks are looking at right now. So even though you would say, oh gee, I'm looking at Pedro the photographer from the wetland, what you're actually looking at is light reflecting off of Pedro and coming towards you. If this room was dark, you would not be able to see me. You only see me insofar as there is light here. So that's the photo part. And photograph, to graph in Greek is to draw or to paint something. So a photograph is a drawing, a painting made by light. And I think that definition is actually quite important to the photographer, in the sense that you need to realize that whenever you're taking something, we always say in the language, I'm taking a picture of, so that there is a reference, an equivalency. You're saying, oh, bird, picture of bird. But what you're actually seeing, what your camera is seeing, is the light that happened to bounce off the bird and come towards you, towards the camera position. And that is important because every type of light will have a different effect upon your subject. Some lights are not so easy to handle. Some lights, types of light render beauty. Some of the types of light don't are not as friendly. So always keep in mind that you need to be thinking one of the more advanced topics as you grow in photography is not the quantity of light, is the quality of the light. Some types of light will elevate a picture. Some types of light may not be as complementary depending on the point you're trying to make. Just for your research after this presentation, if you want to go online, I do have some favorite types of light that I very much look for when I'm in the field and if I'm able to get it. I would say the number one type of light that I deal with that is very friendly and that is usually pleasing to the viewer is what is called in the industry in photography beauty light. And beauty light, basically, imagine if you're in a position where your shadow points to the front, meaning you, the photographer, are casting a shadow that is directly in front of you. For the light to achieve that, the light has to come from directly behind you, and it goes that way. So that means that as the subject looks at the light, they're getting something called front light. So beauty light is front light, and it's uniform, and it's a good type of light that brings out a decent amount of detail, a decent amount of color, and it's mostly complementary light. If you look at how many models are photographed, especially the term glamour lighting, that is light that comes from the front, and it tends to be simple light, but in that simplicity it has beauty. It also has some shortcomings in that most of the time it lacks what I would call dynamics. It tends to be a little static. It also tends to be a little bit too uniform, a little bit flat, if you will. But it's not a bad place to start. And if I see a subject in front of me that is getting the flat light, if it's getting that beauty light, I'm definitely going to photograph it, because maybe the picture is not about dramatic light. Maybe the picture is about detail, it's about color, it's about some action that that bird is taking at that very moment. Besides that type of light, I would say my second favorite type of light that I'm always looking for out there is called Rembrandt light. And it's a type of side light that is not just coming from the side, it's coming a little bit in front of the side light. And that light is characterized, if you look at a portrait, by something called the Rembrandt triangle, which is a triangle that appears under the eye, away from the light. Now that light is not side light, it's not front light, it's kind of in the middle between the two. And by doing that, it's a light that provides you with several assets that are very valuable to the photographer. It gives you very good detail, it gives you very good color, and it gives you some drama. And the cameras typically don't have a problem metering that light, so it's fairly easy light to handle. And then my favorite light nowadays is actually light that is kind of akin to the light that I just described, the Rembrandt light, but this light comes from slightly behind, and it also comes from between the backlight and the side light. And a lot of photographers refer to that light as rim light, and I love that type of light because of the drama it creates and the rim effect around the subject that separates the subject from the background. So please write those down, Rembrandt light, rim light, and beauty light. And I think those are a really good place for most folks to start as they grow in photography. So anyways, enough about the light. I will come back to that topic a little later. But now I would like to discuss some specifics as to how it is that we get out there with our equipment and take the photographs. So first, obviously we know that we need a camera, which is a device that looks like so. Now notice that all of the cameras out there nowadays are basically little boxes. See the shape? This is pretty standard. This is a Fuji camera that imitates the classic Leica M camera, which I love. And notice the shape. It's a box. Now, why is it a box? Is there logic to the issue of the box? And I would say no, it's imperfect. If you look in nature, and if you look at most of the cameras that nature produces, we all have two of them. It's called our eyes. And most animals have that sort of vision where they have two eyes. You're going to notice that across most of the animal kingdom, the eyes, the camera that is built into us, is not a box. It's actually a sphere. And that's basically because our technology is still quite primitive when it comes to these devices, in the sense that nature has something that is way better called the eye, where you have a retina that captures the image on the back and is concave, and in the front you have a convex element that naturally projects, so they project perfectly like so. And I think eventually we may have cameras that do that, but today we're stuck with something that looks like this. And typically along the top you have the basic controls, and on a classic camera you have a shutter dial right here that controls the shutter speed. On a classic camera you also have an aperture dial down here that controls the aperture of the lens. Okay, now so that's part number one. The other part that is really important to the nature photographer is this device right here, the lens. The lens is what gathers the light and throws it onto the camera. And both elements are equally important. You cannot take a picture without one of these, and you cannot take a picture without the camera. But again, in the most natural, most logical camera, both elements are fused into one, and it's called an eye. So in other words, what you're holding, your camera is basically an imitation, or tries to imitate to the best of its ability, the optical system that is built into us called the eyeball. Okay. Now let me talk a little bit about the settings that I use and the settings that come in the camera, and I will run through the settings, a little bit of the background of the settings, and which settings I recommend and which settings to explore, because as I said before, there is no one single way to do this. There's that old saying that all roads lead to Rome, and I think that is very true in the sense that you can always come up with a set of settings that will work for you. The question is which ones are the most efficient and which ones will be the most productive. But when you're starting out, you're definitely free to explore all of them. If we look at a classic camera, you're going to see basically in the standard cameras of today, you're going to see a dial. See it right here on the Olympus. You'll see that right there also on the Sony as well. You're going to see that this camera has the following. It has the letter P, which stands for program. You have the letter A, Apple, that stands for aperture priority. If you happen to be a Canon owner, yours will say AV, Victor, for aperture value. Then you have S, which is shutter priority. Canon folks would have TV, which does not stand for television. It stands for time value. And you have the M, which stands for manual. And in this camera in particular, I have a couple other ones, but I'm not going to go into those other ones because they're not general to other cameras. So let me start a little bit with the history of those controls. The first cameras that came out that were considered portable came out in the 1920s and 1930s from a German manufacturer by the name of Leica. And they created a very simple camera with the shutter dial on top and the lens control on the lens. And up on top, all you had were the speeds on the dial. In those classic Leica cameras, there was no automation because there was no electronics. They were basically only manual cameras. And the manual camera, you, the photographer, had two settings to control. You controlled your speed and you controlled your aperture. Now, you also had film inside the camera that had an ISO speed. You didn't control that. I mean, you controlled it in the fact that you went to the store and you would buy ISO 100, ISO 400, ISO 800 film. But once you put that roll of film in the camera, the ISO was not changeable. It was one ISO, and it was the ISO from the manufacturer. So you basically had two controls, and you had to balance the light between the two controls. Now, initially, guess what? We really didn't have good meters out there in the camera. So back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, you would see people holding this little device that was a light meter, and they would go around measuring light, and then they'd take a look at the settings, and they'd take the settings from the meter and put them on the camera. Unless you were in full sunlight and you learned the rule of F16, and you memorized that, and then you did those settings in the camera. So anyways, the original, just to summarize this, the original mode that everybody had to use for approximately 40 years in the first stage of photography was manual. And in manual, the photographer controls shutter speed, and he controls the aperture. Now, as you can imagine, since you're controlling everything, that means also that it is laborious and that you have to be paying attention to those technical aspects because they're not taken care of automatically for you. For that reason, I am not a big fan of recommending manual to folks who are starting out, because now instead of you focusing on the beauty in front of you, and instead of being cognizant of what's going on in front of you, you're fiddling. I think any technique that leads to fiddling keeps the photographer looking at the camera. And that is the last place you want to be looking at when you're taking a picture. When you're taking a picture, this part is not what you need to look at. You need to be looking at the subject. Okay? So that is why I would not recommend M, even though your cameras have it. Is there an instance under which I would recommend M? Yeah, for sure. If you're doing studio photography, something that is very slow, not moving, you're photographing a watch, you're photographing something, a tabletop setup, say. Maybe you're doing the landscape. For the landscape is great because landscapes normally don't run anywhere. They're just there. There may be changes in light, but all of that is fairly easy to adjust. So to me, M is something that is slow and it's great for that sort of thing. Do I use it in the landscape personally? No. I basically use aperture priority, and I'll talk at length about aperture priority since it's my favorite at the end. Okay, the next one that I would like to address is P, which is program. In the letter P, the camera is doing both for you. So from that standpoint, it's great because you're basically saying to the camera, you know what, I don't want to worry about the settings. You go ahead and worry about the settings, and I'm just going to worry about my photography. The problem with P is that P does not know what you're photographing. P doesn't know that you're photographing a bird that moves fast, and therefore the speed needs to be high. P doesn't know that you have a busy background and you need to blur it out, and so it's likely to choose an aperture that could make you render your background too sharp. So P surrenders too much control. So while it is great from the standpoint of not having to fiddle, it is not very good from the standpoint of owning and controlling your camera accurately. So I do not recommend P for bird photography. When do I think P is great? I believe P is fantastic if, say, you're shooting a family event and you're trying to enjoy your family, you're trying to enjoy the event, and you don't want to be paying attention to your camera settings. P will most of the time in the snapshot environment give you a decent snapshot. So highly recommended for that, but not for bird photography. Now the next one is a controversial one, and it's one that I've gone back and forth a lot with many professional photographers and advanced photographers, and it's called shutter priority. Some folks out there are believers in shutter priority, meaning that's the one where you set the shutter speed of the camera, and therefore, since you set the shutter speed, the camera sets the other parameter, and the other parameter will be the aperture. So, user, you own the shutter, the camera owns the aperture. Now you would say, well, that one's wonderful because with that one, I can get the camera to go fast if I want to freeze motion, or I can slow down the camera so that the camera will record movements, say waterfalls, say wings flapping, that sort of thing. So from a basic logic standpoint, it would seem like shutter priority would be a fantastic option for you, meaning shutter priority would allow you to control the speed. But to me, shutter priority has several downfalls that make it a no-go for me personally. And they are the following. Let me give you my premier example. Let's say that you're out there and it is sunny. You got a lot of light. And let's say that you're doing action photography, so you're keeping your speed nice and high, 1,000 speed, 2,000 speed, which is pretty good for birds in activity. Well, guess what? Because there is so much light out there, shutter priority will render you with a very, very small aperture. And most of the time, the last thing I want when I'm in the field is a small aperture, because a small aperture yields sharp backgrounds. I'm always trying to do the opposite. I'm trying to get my background to recede. I'm trying to blur out my background. I'm trying for my subject to stand out. So that's problem number one that I see with shutter speed, and one of the main reasons why I don't go to shutter priority, or I'm sorry, to the shutter control, meaning shutter priority. The other reason to me that is problematic when you go to shutter priority is that in shutter priority, the camera gets to control the aperture. So the next question is, okay, if it's controlling the aperture, how much can it control? Well, if you have the average lens out there, you probably have a lens that is an f4 or an f5.6. Now, every single aperture is a whole level of light. And what I'm trying to say about there is f4 is twice as much light as f5.6. f5.6 is twice as much light as f8, as f11, as f16. So let us say, for example, that you have an f4 lens. Well, an f4 lens has f4, obviously. You could close it down to 5.6. You could close it to 8. You could close it to 11 or 16. So again, let me run you through those numbers. 4, 5, 6, 8, 11, and 16. So if you have an f4 lens, your camera now gets to handle 5 stops of control. That seems plenty, right? Well, not so much. If for some reason your light goes really dark, now you're stuck, because at f4 the lens has no way to open up beyond that. And if it ends up hunting in the other end, most lenses have a problem. Actually, all lenses have this problem. When you stop them down too much, you get an optical issue called diffraction, which basically means lens unsharpness. So by using shutter priority, you're to a certain extent misusing your lens, because your lens will, a lot of times your camera will want to dial in a very small aperture that will yield diffraction. So my main beef with shutter priority is, number one, the fact that it doesn't have that much to control, and that in the control it has, it may yield you images that are not as good as they could be, because you are on the small side of the lens, meaning on the small apertures, and the small apertures give you sharp backgrounds and don't give you the ultimate sharpness when it comes to your subject. By the way, folks, if I'm speaking too fast or too slow, please say that in the comments below. That way I will know to either speed up or slow down. Okay, so now let me take you to the last exposure mode, that is the one that I've been using for many years, and is my preferred one, and it's called, let me get the camera again, and it's called the letter A as in apple. Everybody see it right there on the dial? And A stands for aperture priority. Now, I'm going to try to sell you on aperture priority to those of you who don't use it, but again, I want to remind you what I said at the beginning. No rules. If you have found a way of doing this better that is done without aperture priority, I totally understand that, and I don't have a problem with it. But I love aperture priority because I firmly believe that it is the fastest, most efficient way to get to a correct exposure that has the right aesthetics, okay? And with aperture priority, you, the photographer, own the aperture. Now, I invest in professional lenses, and one of the things that professional lenses have is they yield high sharpness wide open. In fact, most lenses, if you go back to physics, most lenses ought to perform at their best either wide open or close to wide open. So I always want to stay on the better side of the lens, meaning wide open. So for example, my favorite lens in the wetland today is this Olympus lens, which is a 300mm f4. And which aperture do I use it at? Pretty much f4 all the time. Why is that? Well, f4, by being the widest aperture, gathers the most light possible for any given situation, and from the subject back, it gives me very little focus, which is just what I want, because I want to be able to separate my subject from that background. I want the subject to be very sharp, and I want the background to do the opposite. I want the background to recede. I want the background to not be as sharp. So that's why I recommend aperture priority. It allows me artistically to separate my subject from its backgrounds. Also, because by having the lens open, you're gathering the most light possible for any given situation. You're also making sure your speeds stay nice and high. And I am very much into high speeds. I do a lot of birds in flight. I do things that move fast, and therefore I need to freeze motion. So to me, as a bird photographer, speed is half the game. I want to keep that speed up. So what do? I typically go to the wetland with my lens always wide open at f4. Now and then I might go to 5.6 or I may go to f8 if I have a situation where the bird may have another bird nearby and I would like both of them to be sharp, or if for some reason I'm very close and the bird may have a little bit more depth than the wide open lens would handle, I may go to f5, 6, and f8, but most of the time I will be shooting at f4. By the way, I post a lot of pictures on Facebook, and unfortunately whenever I post to Facebook, Facebook does not display the EXIF information, the technical information on how the image was taken. But I also post to another place that I love called Flickr, FLICKR, and I will post the links down below at the end of the presentation so that you folks can access my Flickr. I love Flickr because Flickr, whenever I put a picture up, it has below the image the full EXIF information from the camera. I never take that information out. I never amend it. I never change it. That way, anybody looking at one of my images on Flickr will be able to see exactly what settings I have. And you'll see that pretty standard for me is aperture priority and keeping that lens wide open, sometimes stopping it down a little bit, but almost never that much. So just to summarize, aperture priority will be my recommendation. Please give it a try. By the way, if you want to have a presentation or hear a presentation from a professional photographer who has been at it much longer than I will post a link below on YouTube to a BBC nature photographer. His name is Cowardine, and he's an excellent presenter, and he has a whole discussion as to why aperture priority is the best way for you to take photographs in the field when it comes to nature. And so he basically seconds a lot of the stuff that I have said, but I think sometimes it's good to hear the message said in different words by a different person, because in that way you may nuance a different meaning than the one you got from me, or perhaps I went too fast or too slow and you didn't get it. You'll get it the second time around. So please give a try. The other thing that I love about aperture priority is I'm very much a believer in the principle of KISS, K-I-S-S, which is keep it simple and stupid, meaning have the minimum amount of controls that get you there so that you don't go around screwing things up. Once I have too many things to deal with, it is very, very easy for me to get overwhelmed. I get confused when too many things are happening. So if I keep it to aperture priority, I know I'm only worrying about one control only, and it's the aperture. Now, if I have the aperture set wide open, I'm guaranteeing high speeds, but the other control that I need to take care of is the ISO. The ISO is the sensitivity of your camera to light. Obviously, high ISOs mean more sensitivity, low ISOs mean less sensitivity. The other issue with ISO, though, is as you go up in ISO, you surrender quality. So going up the ISO scale too high will give you, in the digital world, something called noise, which most folks don't like noise. I don't like noise myself. So going high gets you noise. Staying low gives you quality. So you would say, oh my God, I want to stay low. Always stay low because low gives me quality. Well, the problem with staying low is that it also slows things down. It also means that your camera will be yielding for you low shutter speeds. And that kind of goes against what I'm trying to do, which is keep my camera running fast so that I can freeze those birds and make sure that my bird is nice and sharp. So if high ISOs get me in trouble with quality and low ISOs get me in trouble because the speed is too low, where do I go? Well, the logical answer is somewhere in the middle, and the question is, where in the middle do you want to go? And here my philosophy is simple. I don't keep it low because I don't want to be with my hands tied behind my back fighting with low shutter speeds. I don't want to go too high because if I go high, I get in trouble with quality. So where do I decide to be? I basically have looked at my cameras and I looked at the ISO from my cameras, and I basically do something that I pick my poison. I pick the ISO, the highest ISO that gives me happiness. Meaning, at what ISO level do I say, oh, I just don't like this doesn't look good to me. For the current cameras that I'm using, which is the Olympus OM1, that ISO level is ISO 1600. And I believe that ISO is excellent today with contemporary cameras on either crop sensor cameras or micro four thirds cameras. What I'm saying there is smaller sensors, meaning the 1-inch sensor, which is the one on cameras like the D500, or the micro four thirds sensor, which is a little smaller, which is the one on the Olympus. If I'm shooting a full frame camera, something like a Sony A9 or a Sony A1, those sensors are a little bigger, therefore they're more tolerant of the high ISOs. So if I had a Sony, I would say you could easily go up to ISO 3,000-4,000 and still make me happy. Now keep in mind that this idea of what ISO is good and what ISO is not good is very much a personal appreciation sort of thing. Some folks are more resistant or more tolerant of noise. Some folks are highly intolerant of noise. So the only person who can really answer the question as to what ISO makes you happy is you. So you need to go out there, you need to take images at the different ISOs and decide where on the ISO scale you want to live. And like I said at the beginning of this discussion on ISO, I pick my poison. I'm at ISO 1600 in the low light situations. Now, ISO 1600, frankly, is too high an ISO if you are out there, say, at 11 o'clock or at noontime, and at those times, ISO 1600 will yield speeds that are just way too high. And even the lens you may need to close it down, and I don't want to do that. So what happens is later in the day, I may transition to ISO 1800. But I basically have two ISOs when I'm in the wetland, and they're either ISO 1600 when I'm close to sunset, sunrise, and the rest of the time I'll be at ISO 800 or ISO 1000. Now keep in mind that when I'm talking about the ISO 800 1000 is when my subject is receiving direct light from the sun. As soon as I go into a shaded environment, which by the way Green Cay has tons of them, Waco also has some, if I'm in a shaded area, meaning where the sun is not reaching my subject directly, at that moment I immediately would go up to my ISO 1600. Now keep in mind a lot of the cameras today have something called auto ISO, where you can go into the camera and you can tell the camera to hunt within a range. Meaning you could say, okay, I want the high to be 16 and the low to be 800 or 400. And you could do that, and that's another way of solving the problem. I personally like to know exactly where the ISO is at, and I basically choose those two. So before I move on, let me show you exactly how I would configure my camera to go to the field. And by the way, very important note that may be helpful to you before you get out there. I try not to fiddle with the camera in the field because I feel that anytime that I'm looking down at the camera, I'm not seeing my subjects, and that to me is exactly the wrong thing to do. So what I do is I always set up my camera before I exit my home, before I get into my car to go to Waco or Green Cay. That's when I'm here messing around with the camera. And again, I would be in letter A, aperture priority, and then I would turn the camera on, and as soon as I turn my camera on, I would look at the aperture. In this camera, the aperture is displayed right there. Notice that it is lit in a different color, meaning that is the control that aperture priority affords me, is that aperture. So here I would go and I would set it to my widest aperture, which would be aperture f4. And that's where it would stay pretty much the whole time. As I said, I would wager that 90% of my pictures that I take in the wetland are taken wide open with the lens taking in as much light as it can take. Now, I am relying, obviously, when I'm taking my photographs, on the meter that is built into the camera to meter the situation. And the meter is not always accurate. One wishes that they were always accurate, but that is not the case. When the meters fail, and this is an area this is very important because I see a lot of folks in the field are producing images that are either too bright or too dark, and it's because they fail to adjust their camera for the given light situation. And there's two situations today that will fool most cameras that are in the market today. Situation number one that will always yield you a bad exposure is whenever you have a white subject with a dark background. When does that happen? Well, anytime you have an egret, an egret is highly reflective, a white egret, meaning a gray egret, any white bird. If you put that bird in front of any background that is less than gray, meaning it's towards the dark end, it's going to overexpose the bird, and your bird is going to look like a light bulb. In those conditions, you're going to need to dial in compensation down, meaning you're going to tell the camera to take in less light to make sure that the white feathers on the bird stay nice and white. So how do you do that? Very simple. In most cameras, you're going to have, let me do my pen here, you're going to have a dial that looks like this dial right here. Everybody see that? It's a dial that has a plus and a minus. Everybody see this? And when you press that dial, let me do it for you here with this camera. When you press that dial, notice that now there is a compensation scale below the aperture that is right there. And if I rotate, now all of a sudden I can affect what is called compensation. And that basically is telling the camera, hey, you're doing a great job, but you need to go give me a little bit less light or a little bit more light. With white birds against dark backgrounds, 99% of the time you're going to need minus compensation. And the magical number there in my mind is minus 1.3 or minus 1 1/3 to minus 1.7. By the way, I will put some of this down below after the class so that you folks can reference it. So white bird, dark background, always go minus. In fact, because that is so common, so many of our birds have those highly reflective feathers, I normally keep my camera to begin with already on the minus compensation side, already preparing for the fact that that is what I'm likely to encounter. So again, that's the main failure situation, is a white subject against a dark background, and you're going to go minus. The other failure situation is kind of the flip side of that. If you were to have a very dark subject against a light background, what tends to happen is the camera thinks you're taking pictures of that very light thing. It takes in less light than it should take, and it will render your subject as a silhouette, meaning the subject is going to look black with no detail. Now, if you want a silhouette, perfect. But if you actually want to see detail in the bird, you need to do the opposite. You need to compensate plus, because the camera is making a mistake by focusing too much on the background. In that case, you're going to go +1. So just to recap, on the compensation side, for white birds or light birds against dark backgrounds, and let me actually be very specific about the birds. Any bird that has white feathers, also say a roseate spoonbill will have that problem. With all of those, you're going to have to go minus, and the answer is going to be minus 1.3 to minus 1.7. And if you have a dark bird, which we do have a few of those, something like a glossy ibis, for example, in that case, you're going to have to go +1. By the way, with most of the cameras today, we have a screen in the back, and you can play back. So you can actually see the result of your compensation and decide, oh, this looks good, or no, it doesn't look good, let me do it again. Now, one distinction here, if you have an older style camera, a DSLR, where you're looking through a viewfinder, the viewfinder on the DSLR does not let you see the result of compensation when you enter it, because you're actually looking at the subject. It's an optical path. The camera is not seeing the image, you're seeing the image. So compensation in the older cameras like the D500, like the D5, like the Canon EOS 7D, could only be seen when you took a picture and played it back. But with mirrorless, which is what most folks are buying nowadays, and is what I would actually recommend you buy, with mirrorless is different, because with mirrorless, you're actually seeing what the sensor is seeing. And in that situation, you actually see the results of compensation live. So compensation on a mirrorless camera is wonderful, because you're basically seeing what you're going to get. And you can actually see, oh, I'm compensating too little, I'm compensating too much. So highly recommend that you keep that control, and that you always have that control at hand. To me, I actually keep my cameras on something called fast compensation, where I don't have to press that button that I showed you. I just set up a dial, and it's very quick, and that dial is basically always prepped to compensate whenever I need compensation, because I know I'm going to need it. So it's almost never a question of whether I will need it, is how much I'm going to need. Okay? Now, I just saw one of the questions that came through is, how do I change the ISO? Most cameras, like this one, will have a button somewhere. Let me show you on this one. It has a button marked ISO. And to change the ISO, I just press that button, and I go, and it will, let me actually show you on this camera. If the camera is turned on, and I press ISO, it automatically brings up an ISO scale, and I can just scroll to the left or to the right. So it depends on which camera you have. Look for that button. Some cameras do not have a button marked ISO, and you actually have to access the menu through your control panel in the back. Like for example, on the Olympus camera, if I have the panel here and I want to access that panel, I hit the middle, and then by hitting in the middle of the control wheel here, I'm able to access any item on the panel by scrolling. It depends on the camera that you have. I just showed you how you do it on the Olympus camera. I also happen to have a Sony camera. Give me 1 second, please. On the Sony camera, the ISO is a little different. By the way, the camera that I have in front of me right now is a Sony A9 right here. And on the Sony A9, anytime you want to change the ISO, you have to go look at your control wheel in the back where it's labeled ISO right there. And then if you press this wheel on the right side, it will, give me a second, haven't used this camera in a while. If I press the ISO on the right side, it brings up a scale on this side, and then you scroll up and down and you select your ISO using that scale. Okay? So again, aperture priority, control your ISO, use the highest ISO that you're okay with, that yields the results that you want. And so basically I hit the field always lens set to my biggest aperture, which is f4. I do have an f2.8 lens, and if I have that lens, then I'll be at f2.8. ISO stays fairly high to make sure that I can freeze motion, and I will sometimes go down if there's a lot of light, but I'm not a believer in low ISOs for birds. Do I ever use low ISOs? Yeah, for sure. If I'm photographing something that is not moving, then I love a low ISO. Also, if I'm photographing the landscape, for example, landscape is not running anywhere, it's fairly static, so there I feel that using a low ISO is entirely appropriate. Also for portraits, people don't move that fast. But anytime that I'm doing what I'm calling action photography, I will be using the higher ISOs. Now keep in mind also that I am very much an action photographer. I'm always looking for birds in flight. I'm always looking for birds doing something that is active, that is dynamic. And therefore, because birds move fairly fast, I'm always looking to keep that shutter speed nice and high. And keep in mind, some people say to me, well, I'm photographing this bird right here, that bird is just perched. I could be at a low ISO and take advantage of my quality, and it will be great. And yes, I agree, I totally agree with that. But what happens when that unexpected bird flies overhead? Will you have enough presence of mind and enough speed to, on the fly, change the ISO from that static bird that was right there and that you were at ISO 200 to be able to adjust to a high ISO to catch up with this guy over here? I am not that fast. So I would say to that person, no, I am not fast enough to go from static bird ISO 200 to go to bird in flight at ISO 1600 in the blink of an eye. And now keep in mind, when we're talking about the blink of an eye, I have a rule I call the 1 second rule, and you may want to write this down. This is one rule that I came up with, but it's something that you may want to try and that I find it very helpful as far as my practice as I prepare for the field. And the 1 second rule is as follows. In 1 second, which is 1/1000, several things need to happen for you to be able to successfully capture birds in flight. Number one, you need to be able to, within that second, bring the camera up, find your subject, compose your subject, focus on your subject, and photograph your subject. So literally, if I have the camera in my hand like here, which I'm always holding my camera close to my face, if I'm walking the wetland, I need to be able to do this 1/1000. 1/1000, meaning in that 1/1000 I was able to bring the camera, intersect my line of sight, frame properly, and photograph. And it is my firm opinion that in order for you to become good at doing birds in flight, you need to master those 5 events within 1 second. If you cannot accurately frame, focus, and press the shutter within 1 second, birds in flight is going to be rather difficult for you. So this is something that you have to practice. And by the way, sometimes if I'm sitting in the house and I'm not doing anything, I'll pick my camera and I will do that practice to make sure that my speed is up to level. Okay. So anyway, so enough about compensation, ISO. Let me look at my list of items that I need to discuss. Now we're going to talk a little bit about cameras, different camera recommendations, the technology that's out there, and how it is that you can go about making a decision as to whether your equipment is where you want to be at, or if you want to upgrade your equipment or change your equipment. We are now going through a very interesting period in photography, but it's also a challenging period because the average camera today has become a computer, and computers evolve so very quickly that it is really very tough to keep up with the technology. And every 2-3 years, your wonderful camera from 5 years ago is no longer as good as what's available at that point. To me, I need, number one, when I need a camera, I need a camera that fits my hand properly. And let me show you what I mean by that. I'll show you one that fits properly, and I'll show you one that in my mind doesn't fit properly. To me, the ergonomics of the camera are important. And what I mean by that is, you see this camera right here, you see the handle? My fingers need to fit that handle, meaning these 3 fingers need to perfectly wrap, as you see there. Because guess what? My thumb is going to be holding the back via the thumb rest, and this, my index finger, is going to be the one that is going to be taking the picture, is the one that is going to be pressing the shutter. So to me, this handle is really, really very important. The Olympus OM1, as you can see, has a perfect one. My 3 fingers here are fully able to grasp that camera. So whenever I have a long lens, I don't have an issue with that control. The control is perfect. Now, here's a beautiful camera Sony produced from 2017. It's a professional camera. It's called the Sony A9. It's a wonderful camera. I took many fine pictures with it, but it has one huge problem, in my opinion, and it's this following problem. Notice what happens with this camera when I put my 3 fingers on the grip. Notice that my little finger doesn't fit. It wants to drop off, meaning this camera is, the grip is not tall enough for my hands. And that is a problem for me because when I'm trying to leverage a bigger lens, now all of a sudden I'm having problems balancing the load and keeping good control of my equipment, which is very important. I don't want my equipment falling on the floor. So to me, the Sony A9 is not the best ergonomics for me because my hands are too big. Now, if you happen to be somebody who has smaller hands, then this camera would be excellent. It's a very personal thing. If you have any of the older cameras, they tend to be bigger, so the bigger the hands you have, the more comfortable they are. But if you happen to have small hands, obviously it's going to be an issue. Now, by the way, I see some folks that are asking questions on the feed below, on the comments, and they're asking me why am I not answering their question. I should have said this at the beginning. Let me say it now and repeat it. I will be answering questions at the end of the class, not at this point. So we're ending at around 2 p.m. I'm sorry, around 3 p.m. So at that time, I will look through all the questions and I will do my best to go question by question and answer. So if I'm not answering you, it's not because I don't like you, it's not because I'm ignoring you, it's because I'm trying to get through my spiel before I forget what I'm talking about. So anyway, so please just have some patience with me and I will do my best to answer your specific question. So to me, the ergonomics are important, and I'm always looking for cameras where the grip is good enough so that I don't have this problem of a finger that is not gripping the camera properly, because balance to me is very important. Now, by the way, this is the Sony A9 from 2017, and it has that issue. Sony has addressed that issue in the latest A9 II and the A1. Those cameras fit the hand like perfect, just like my Olympus does. Okay? So ergonomics, and again, ergonomics is something that you have to test. If you have smaller hands, obviously a smaller camera may be for you. If you have bigger hands, the opposite. You may need a bigger camera. Again, going back to camera recommendations, I am primarily a Nikon, Sony, Canon, and Olympus shooter. So keep in mind that you need to take my advice with a grain of salt. I'm an expert in those systems. If you're going to be asking me about Fuji or about other systems, I heard of them, I know about them, but I'm not intimately familiar. I haven't used those cameras at length, so I cannot directly tell you, oh, they're great or they are not great. It's more a matter of what I know about. I used the Nikon D500 and D5 and D4 for years, so I know those cameras intimately and I can talk about them well. I also own their mirrorless cameras, the Z7. I've also played around with the Z50, played with Olympus for a long time, and Canon cameras, and Sony. I own the A9 and I had the A1 for a couple months, so I know those cameras very well and I can speak intelligently about them. So going back to the camera recommendations specific to bird photography, this really depends very much on what your goals are in your bird photography and your pocketbook, meaning a lot of this equipment is going to be expensive. It's going to cost you some money. If you have a generous budget and you do not mind carrying heavier equipment, to me the best in the market today is the Sony A1, no questions asked. I had that camera for 2 months. It's a high resolution camera. It's not much bigger than the Sony A9 that you see right here, but it is a faster camera. It's got all the latest bells and whistles. It does everything very, very well, and I highly recommend that camera. About the only reason why you don't see me holding a Sony A1 camera is the fact that it costs $6,500, and that's quite a bit of money to spend for me to spend on a camera. It does great, but it has that issue. It's expensive. I could have saved up for it, but there is another issue on the Sony side that makes me hesitant to recommend it to everyone. The best lens for that system, for the Sony system, is the Sony 2 to 600 millimeter zoom lens. Well, that combination is a heavy load, and I'm the type that I'll go to the wetland and I will easily spend in the wetland 6-7 hours, and If you're carrying something heavy for a couple hours, it's no big deal. But if you're carrying something heavy for many hours in a day, well, guess again, it's gonna hurt. And yes, in fact, when I was using my Sony A1 with the 2 to 600, I started having foot problems and I started having knee problems. So that keeps me from giving that outfit a total recommendation. It is just a little bit too heavy for my taste. Um, but performance-wise, it's fantastic. Now, if you happen to like Canon as better than Sony, Canon has a very competitive product in that category called the Canon R3, and they do sell a lens that is a little lighter, a little smaller than the Sony equivalent, which is a 100 to 500 millimeter lens. Highly recommended. Also a fantastic kit. Also priced, the camera is priced in the $6,000 range, so it's going to be not for everyone. So this is kind of the budget for those who want and can afford the best of the best. And the Sony to me is very much an outfit not only for those who can afford the very best of the best, but who can also have the strength and the stamina and the build to be able to carry the stuff for a long time. Because one of the things, as you do bird photography, there is no replacement for the amount of hours you spend out there. The more time you spend in the wetland looking for the subjects, the more great results you're going to get. But obviously, by being out there for a very long time with all this heavy equipment, you're going to have to bear the brunt of carrying that equipment. So Sony A1, great, but watch out for the weight. Make sure that it's something that you actually can carry effectively and want to carry effectively. My answer is the Sony A1 is a little bit too much for me. Now, keep in mind that this is very much a person-to-person answer, in the sense that I have some friends at the wetland who shoot the big lenses, and they're Superman. I mean, they're wonderful. They're amazing. They can do this stuff. They can carry these lenses, and they're happy with them. And they seem to be none the worse for the load. So great. I mean, it's fantastic for them that they're able to do that. But I personally find that the Sony A1 with the 2 to 6 already pushes me to the limit, and therefore I don't give it a blanket recommendation. But if you can afford it, a wonderful piece of kit. Now, for those of you who want to keep it under $5,000, there it is very interesting, because now you have several choices, and some of them a lot lighter that could actually be the better choice for you. To me, right now, the best camera under 5,000, including lens, would be the Olympus OM1. The reason why I like the Olympus OM1, as you saw before, and let me show it again to you, the ergonomics are wonderful. It's a smaller camera. It's not too heavy, it's not too light either, and it has all of the latest technology that helps you in this game. And what do I mean by the latest technology that helps you in this game? Please write this down, because this one you probably never heard of before, but to me this is technology that is invaluable for the bird photographer. And the first bit of technology that I want you to know about is called the stacked sensor. Stacked, S-T-A-C-K-E-D. What is a stacked sensor? Stacked sensor is a new technology that was developed around 2015-16 by Sony. And what the stacked sensor does is the stacked sensor allows the camera to read the information very fast from the sensor onto the camera. And what that does for the camera, it allows the camera to have very effective subject recognition and subject tracking, meaning the camera, the latest Sony cameras do this, the latest Canon cameras do this, the latest Olympus do this. The camera actually can recognize a bird, put a box around the bird, and put around a box on the eye. Therefore, you don't have to worry about finding the bird and focusing on the bird. The camera is doing that for you, and I think of that as a game changer. But that is only available with cameras that have stacked sensors and a fast readout. Now, obviously, since Sony developed that technology, they were the first ones to deploy it on a camera, and they took advantage of that to basically conquer, in my mind, the professional market. And the first camera that features a stack sensor is the camera that I've been showing you, is the Sony A9. So to me, this is a great camera to get used, because it is the first camera. You can get it for a good deal. This is the first camera that has that stack sensor technology, fast readout, and is very good at tracking subjects across the frame. Now, since Sony introduced that technology on the Sony A9, the stack sensor has gone into the A9, the A9 II, and obviously the flagship camera with this, which is the A1. Canon has a similar technology that they put into their R6, R7, R3, and all their professional cameras have that same level of technology with the fast readout, and so they're able to have very effective bird tracking. Olympus also has the technology in the latest OM1. And all of these cameras have subject recognition. You can tell it to chase a bird. It puts a box around the bird, and it chases your bird, and it's wonderful. I'll show you on my Olympus camera. By the way, this is my Olympus camera that I deploy in the field, and let me show you very quickly here. One second, please. Okay, autofocus set up correctly. There it is. To get the bird tracking, to have it on continuous autofocus. One moment. I did not set up this camera for the class. Shame on me. I should have done that. Give me one moment so that I can show you exactly what it looks like. Well, I'm not. One second. I see. I set it up for something other than what I'm doing here. So, one moment, please. Let me just set up this camera. I want to make sure you see what I'm talking about on my menu. Okay. I had it set up to a special mode that doesn't allow for birds in flight. Okay, here we go. Autofocus continues. One moment, please. Okay, finally I can show you here. When I'm set up for birds, I know this is going to be really small. Oh, the screen's too bright. Anyways, please believe me, there is a little bird that appears on my screen when this camera is set up to do birds in flight. So literally, I can tell the camera, listen, we're going to be doing birds today, and the camera knows to look for that shape, and it will track it across the sky as soon as I point it to something that has a bird in the frame. And by the way, the Sony does the same thing, and all of the cameras that have bird tracking will have that same facility. Older cameras obviously don't have that ability, and to me that's kind of a game changer. So you're going to see that a lot of my recommendations, top recommendations, are cameras that have that bird tracking. So going back to my recommendations for the category below $5,000, my primary one is the Olympus OM1. We will talk a little bit about the lenses after I'm done with the cameras, because obviously it's a combination that produces the final budget. It's not just the camera. Besides the Sony A1, the Olympus OM1, I obviously still recommend very much the original Sony A9. The original Sony A9 was a rather expensive camera at around $4,000, but in the used market nowadays, they go very reasonable for around $200 to $2,500, and it remains a fantastic buy. The other one that sells very well and that is not too expensive is the Canon R6. Also has bird tracking, and it has the latest technology. And Canon just introduced a fantastic little camera called the Canon R7 that also has bird tracking, and I highly recommend as well because of that. Now, obviously, all these cameras need a lens in front of the camera, and because of that, that's plays into the budget. On the Sony side, the 2-600 is a fantastic piece, but it does set you back $2,000, and it is quite heavy. So before you invest in that system, I suggest you go to a camera store and you handle the load to make sure that you can handle the load effectively. But it is a lens that does very well. I own it, and I can vouch for that. On the Canon side, the 100 to 500 I have photographed with that lens is a very good lens. It's very sharp. It's not as heavy as the Canon, as the Sony piece. So from that standpoint, it's a great lens, and I highly recommend that lens as well. Unfortunately, the price. That Canon 100 to 500 will set you back around $3,000, so you're kind of bumping up into another category as far as lens. Notice that so far I have not mentioned Nikon. And please don't think I'm an enemy of Nikon at all. I used Nikon for many, many years. Love their D5 and the D500. In fact, I still own my D5, and my D500 now sits happily in the hands of one of my students who's doing fantastic work with it. But the reason why I didn't mention Nikon is because Nikon right now, for their mirrorless system, does not have an equivalent lens that goes 200 to 500 or 600. They do have a 2 to 500 for their older AFS system, but it has to be adapted. And anytime that you adapt something from one system to another, you're likely to encounter malfunctions and things that don't work properly. So I'm very hesitant to go out there and recommend to folks things that need to be adapted. They need to be natively supported. So you did not hear me mention Nikon, because right now Nikon does not have a lens that fits their camera that has bird tracking, which by the way is the Nikon Z9, Nikon Z9, fantastic camera. A little heavy, a little big. I could get past that if they had the lens, but they don't have the lens. So at this time, I am not recommending Nikon, not because they're not good, but because they don't have a lens that gets you out to 5-600 native for that camera. The longest they make right now is they do have a 100 to 400, but to me 400 is a little too short for a full frame camera in a place like Green Cay or Waco. So you need longer glass, and the longer glass they have is is basically professional pieces that are very, very expensive. So that's why you're not hearing the Nikon name in this presentation so far. Now, besides the Canon and the Olympus that I mentioned before, the OM1, I'm also very much into the Sony a7 IV, the latest one. That camera had the a7, a7 I, a7 II, a7 III, and now they have the a7 IV. That camera has fantastic tracking. It does very well for birds. My only caveat with the Sony a7 IV, that camera is limited to 10 frames per second, meaning you can take 10 pictures within a second. Now you would say, wow, that's plenty fast, that's great. And I would agree with you, except that today we have cameras like the Sony A1 that does 30, or like my OM1 that does 50. Now, thinking about this, back in the old days when I was doing film photography, we were very happy if we could have a camera that took a few pictures per second. And now these cameras are so very fast that sometimes you kind of think, why do I need all of those pictures? I just want one good picture. Why do I need to take 30? Why do I need to take 50? Well, I think theoretically speaking, that is a correct thought. Nobody needs 50 pictures of the same thing in 1 second, except the following. Getting a fantastic image to a certain extent is a lottery, meaning there is going to be one moment that is going to be the very best moment for a photograph. There are moments that are going to be almost as good, and moments that are just past the moment that was as good, that was the best. By being able to choose from 50 or from 30 or from 20, you got to play the lottery a lot more times. And therefore, the probability that you are going to get a great image is higher. So basically, it's about playing the numbers game. The more frames that you can deploy onto your target, the more opportunities you have. Now, some people may be asking me about Sony. I keep talking about Sony full frame cameras, and I'm not talking about the Sony cameras that, by the way, folks are having problems with the sound. Please report that here on the chat. I'm looking, and some people seem to be having a problem hearing me. Let me see if I can adjust my volume. Okay, I'm getting reports that people are hearing me just fine. Okay, on the Sony side, why didn't I mention the cheaper cameras, the 6000 series that are smaller and less expensive? The main reason why I didn't mention the cheaper cameras is because that stack sensor technology that Sony has developed is not yet being deployed to the smaller Sony cameras. So while they're great cameras, they do not have the bird tracking ability of the Sony A9 or the Sony A1. And to me, that's kind of a hole in their lineup right now. But I expect Sony will very soon address that, and you will have cameras in that category with the bird tracking. But to me, the bird tracking is a real game changer, and whenever I'm recommending folks buy a camera, I'm recommending cameras that have that. Okay? So that's in the under 5,000 category. Now, if your budget is below $2,000, now there's going to be a little bit of a problem. Oh, some folks are having problems with the microphone. Let me go to my microphone and see if there's any controllability. No, I don't see any controllability on the microphone. By the way, I'm using an Apple MacBook Air. If anyone out there knows how to turn up the volume on the microphone, please let me know. Okay, so going back to the presentation, If you are in under 2000, unfortunately, as of this day, we do not have a camera under $2,000 that includes effective bird tracking. I do expect that that will change before this year is over. There is rumors that Olympus is about to release a camera with a sensor similar to the one in the OM1, presumably will have the bird tracking, and is supposed to be keenly priced at around the $1,000 point. Therefore, uh, if you wait a little bit before Christmas, I think Olympus may have an answer for those who have under 2,000 to spend. But right now, if you need to go out there today with $2,000 and buy a camera that will support you well in the field when it comes to birds, my recommendations are either a Nikon D500, especially a used one, fantastic camera, fantastic fast autofocus for birds in flight, and great technology for for the time, and the Canon 80D or Canon 7D Mark II. And those cameras will be within a $2,000 budget, including lens as well. So now that I talked about cameras, let me talk about the lenses to go with them, because obviously with a camera by itself you cannot take a picture. You need that lens. Now in general there's two types of lenses that you can use for bird photography, and all of them need to reach out because obviously the birds normally are not that close to you. So you need to be able to get close optically to the subject. Any lens that gets you closer to a subject is called a telephoto, meaning it's like a telescope, but it's a telescope intended for a camera. Now there's two types of telephoto lenses that you can buy today in the marketplace. And the primary one you find, and the one that I would recommend to beginning photographers, is called the zoom telephoto. And zoom telephotos look like this. Zoom telephotos have a zoom ring that allows them to become basically longer lenses. Everybody see that? So in its standard position, that would be the short end, and in its long position, that would be the long end. So it's one lens that does many things. It gives you several lenses in one lens. So from that standpoint, it's very convenient. They also tend to be keenly priced. Obviously, because they're changing focal length, these designs tend to be a little bit more complex, harder to manufacture well, and most of the zoom lenses, while they're very good, very few of them get to be superlative lenses. So they're great, but they never become the best of the best. But this is the option I recommend for those of you who are starting out and cannot commit to a single focal length because you have not developed a style. I personally mostly do not use the zoom lens. Personally, I mostly use one of these. This is a telephoto, but it is not a zoom lens, meaning I cannot adjust my angle of view. I get one single framing, and this one happens to be a 300mm lens on a micro four thirds body. In the micro four thirds world, the sensor is small. It's half the size of a full frame, so the 300 lets me see like a 600mm lens would let me see on a full frame camera. So this is quite a bit of magnification, and from that standpoint, I don't know that I would recommend this for somebody starting out, because 600mm requires some technique that you would have developed over the years. Just to give you a little bit of background about myself, I started doing this back in the 80s. So it's been 1980s. So it's been a long time since I've been playing around with cameras. And I played with, 100mm, 200, 400, and so forth. And so you develop a familiarity and a good hand-holding technique. I would say that the average person starting out, if you give them one of these, they're going to have a lot of problems stabilizing the piece and making sense of this piece. So I would not recommend that you start with something this long. I would recommend that if you're starting out and you choose to go the telephoto way, that you go with something that is more in the range of a 400 as opposed to a 600, which is too much to handhold. Now, the advantage of these fixed lenses, though, is that they tend to feature the best optical quality for your money. But the downside is you cannot zoom them. You have to be in the correct place. So you have to become very good at knowing where it is that you need to stand. With a zoom, you don't have to develop that familiarity because you can always adjust. You can always either frame in or frame out. With a telephoto, you cannot do that. With the telephoto, you either have to walk back or forth. And in the boardwalk, that's not easy to do. Sometimes you need to know, okay, from that position, I know that if the bird perches there, it's going to fit correctly. So you must have a familiarity very much with the lay of the land and know what your lens can do. I happen to know intimately this 600mm lens, and I know where in the wetland where in the boardwalk I need to stand so that a given subject in a given place is going to fit the frame properly. Now, I have developed that since 2008, which is when I've been visiting the wetland, and I, I cannot say how many times I've been there, but it's easily in the many hundreds. So maybe 400 or 500 times. So obviously, from having roamed the wetlands for so many visits, you develop a familiarity. But if you're not familiar with 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 that, you will not know where to stand, and that's where the zoom would really help you. So highly recommend the zooms. On the Olympus side, I think the 100 to 400 would be the piece to get. On the Sony side, there is the 2 to 6 fantastic lens, but it tends to be heavy, so be very careful with that. I already have had students who bought the 2 to 600 and then complained that it was too big and too heavy. If you find that the 2 to 600 lens is too big or too heavy, you may want to go to the Sony 100 to 400 professional lens. It's a fantastic piece, and it's much lighter. It shaves off about a full pound from the 2 to 6, and optically it's just about perfect. On the Canon side, I think Canon folks are really lucky that Canon kept it to 100 to 500, because that lens is pretty reasonable and it's not too heavy. By the way, if you don't have the budget for a 100 to 500 from Canon, which is $3,000, Canon does make a fantastic lens 100 to 400 for their mirrorless cameras, and it only costs like $700-800. So let me make sure that I got that price right. I wrote it down. No, $620. So $620. So very keenly priced, and that is a fantastic piece for the Canon folks if they wish to buy from Canon. And by the way, couple of recommendations. You've heard me mention Sony, Canon. I keep with the big brand names, and I'm not mentioning the other brands. There are independent lens makers out there who typically give you a lot for the money. And then specific names I can think of at this time are Tamron, Sigma, and Tokina. The reason why you don't hear me recommending those lenses is as follows. I have bought them in the past, and they've done well for me in the past. But cameras today are so highly automated, and there is so much that is computerized, that there tend to be compatibility issues with the independent makers. And I have encountered many issues with that, meaning I'll buy a Tamron lens or a Sigma lens and it'll work properly today with the camera I have today. But what happens when you update camera 1, 2, 3 years down the line? Whenever you update the camera, if you're bringing an independent lens maker lens to a brand new camera, I have encountered compatibility issues. And guess what? There may not be any support to get that problem fixed. So to me, that is a problem. And that's why you don't hear me recommending Tamron or Sigma. It's not the fact that it will not work today. I am sure it will work today. In fact, I'm almost certain it will work today, otherwise they wouldn't sell any. The problem is not today. The problem is what happens into the future. I have had issues with Sigma. I had a big issue, I want to say 12, 13 years ago. I had 3, 4 Sigma lenses that I absolutely loved. And when I upgraded cameras, the lenses stopped working properly. So I reached out to Sigma and I said, hey, I need a firmware update or some sort of ability to update these lenses. And at the time, Sigma said to me, no, we don't have a service to update those lenses. If you need, those lenses were sold to you 6, 7 years before. They worked back then, and they were for those cameras. If you need those lenses to work today with your new camera, you need to go out and buy new lenses. And frankly, to me, that was not an acceptable answer from Sigma, that they would tell me, hey, you got 3 lenses, your problem, they work fine when we sold them to you 6 years ago. If you want them to work now, you need to buy new. So when that happened to me with Sigma, I resolved not to buy their products anymore, even though some of their lenses are fantastic. But it's really an issue not of compatibility today, it's an issue of compatibility into the future. Okay, so I'm very hesitant to recommend those. So just to recap, if money is not a problem for you, and if you feel very strong about carrying heavy equipment, highly recommend a Sony A1 or an R3, and any of their long professional glass is going to do you fantastic. Just remember, it's going to be heavy, especially with Sony. If you are in the 2 to 5,000 category, highly recommend the Olympus OM1. By the way, If you want to see my work and see what the kit produces, I post my pictures not only on the Facebook group here, but I also post my pictures to Flickr. I will post the link below so that you can access that. And all the work that I've done for the past 4 or 5 months has been done on the Olympus, so you can see what it can do for you, and perhaps that'll be an answer for you as well. So I love the Olympus. I still have my Sony kit, and sometimes I take it out. It is not my primary kit today, and the main reason why Sony is not my primary kit today is because my Sony A9 is 20 frames per second, and I've become accustomed to higher frame rates than that. Also, the 2-600 is a wonderful lens, but it's a little too heavy for me. The 300 is just about perfect for me. I also have the Olympus 100-400, so it's more of I'm more comfortable with the Olympus, and I can get higher frame rates. Why not Canon? Well, if I had the budget, I'd probably have a Canon if I could afford to have an extra camera. But I have too many cameras. I'm already in trouble at home, like having too much equipment here. So I don't own one, but I've used them extensively. And in the middle category, the Canon R6 is great. The Canon R7 I play with a little bit. Highly recommended. And you can either go with the 100-400 Pro lens or the 100-400 lens. They're both fantastic lenses, and they will do you well. Again, why did I not address Nikon? Main reason, I cannot recommend them at this point because they don't have the glass long enough for their mirrorless camera. Now they do, however, have fantastic long lenses for the DSLRs, but in general, I am not recommending the DSLR because to me the DSLR, frankly, is the past. Mirrorless cameras can do so much more than DSLRs could ever do, and I think the train kind of left the station in that. Both Canon and Nikon have announced that they will not be supporting further development of the DSLRs. So that means that yes, they will repair your old DSLR camera. So have no fear about that. And by the way, your DSLR camera, if it works, it's going to work. So if you want to stay there, you could do that. But there's just a lot of things that a DSLR cannot do that a mirrorless camera can do. That is just too compelling for me not to move to the mirrorless. I think specifically the number one thing that mirrorless to me is fantastic about is that compensation that we spoke about before. With the mirrorless camera, when I compensate, I can actually see through the viewfinder or through the screen on the back, I can see the effects of compensation live real time. With the DSLR, I have to play back. So meaning with the DSLR, I'm correcting a mistake that already happened. With the mirrorless, I am not making the mistake to begin with because I can actually see it. Number one. Number two reason why I went to the mirrorless is the bird tracking. To me, the bird tracking today from Canon, Sony, Olympus, I can only describe it as magic. Sometimes I'll see a bird and I'll lift my camera and I just had enough time to kind of place the bird in the frame, and I'm shooting because the bird was, surprised me, it's too fast. And I'm shooting, and then I'm shocked when I get home and I open my image and there it is, he's sharp. It's a lovely thing to get that sort of help from your camera. With the DSLRs, the autofocus points were all in the middle, mostly closer in the middle. So if a bird surprised you, it was very likely that you would not be able to get autofocus points on the bird. And chances are that you would put the points in the wrong part of the bird. With bird tracking, that is not a problem. So to me, that's been a game changer, and is a technology that I find wonderful. Now, the other thing that I love about the mirrorless versus DSLR is all of the DSLRs from the past, with very few exceptions, but all of the capable DSLRs were pretty beefy, heavy equipment. And to me, that's a problem. I don't want to be carrying more than I need to carry. Mirrorless, to me, has struck the perfect balance between not being too big or heavy and not being too small that I cannot hold it properly. It just fits right. And I can be out there for 6-7 hours, walk the wetland, and not be hurt by my own equipment. Okay, folks, I can see that I covered, I think, most of the material that was meant for the class, meaning camera recommendations and basic settings. So now what I'm about to do is I'm going to be looking through the questions and going through every single one of those questions and answering the questions that are below me. So if you see me staring down, it's not that I'm ignoring the camera, it's that in order for me to see the questions, I have to scroll down. So let me do that on my pad. That way I have two things going on at the same time. Facebook, Black Hole Green Crate Group. One moment while I get to your questions, please. Actually, just remember we're on the Waco page, right? Yes, here we are. Ah, and there I am, and let me see the questions. Okay. Okay, so the top one from Carrie Murray. Well done, just 30 more classes. Thank you very much, Carrie. I will certainly be entertaining more classes. We'll talk about that. Let me look at all of them. Let me go back in the history here. Um, and let me go, let me see. I'm having a problem scrolling to the really old questions. One moment, please. How do I get to see the really old ones? Okay. Questions, comments. Okay. 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 First question is, what do I do for post editing? Very good question. To me, and again, this is very much a personal opinion. You'll find different teachers with different takes on this question. To me, taking a photograph is only half the story. The other half of the story with what happens with a photograph is very much what you do with that information, with the image you gather when you get home. Where did I come up with this idea? Well, I didn't come up with the idea. I want to show you the two books on my favorite photographers of all time, and sort of from the artistic side. These are the photographers that inspire my work, and I hope that my work is doing some justice to the amazing stuff that these two gentlemen did. But the first and foremost photographer that I want to talk about, his name is Mr. Ansel Adams, right here. And Mr. Adams dedicated himself to doing the most amazing landscape photographs ever, and mostly of Yosemite in California, but also various other national parks. The reason why I'm talking about this is because Ansel Adams was the consummate artist when it came to technique. And I'm not talking about just technique in the field, he was incredibly good at that, but I'm also talking about technique as far as processing the image. He has a collection of books, but to me the ones that reference the topic that we're covering right now are two books in particular. He's got a book called The Negative. Remember, he was before digital. There were no digital cameras back when he photographed. So he's got a book on the negative, meaning how one auto capture an image on the negative, and then a book called The Print, meaning that in Ansel Adams' mind, there was a clear distinction between the original, the capture, which was the negative, and the print. And the book on the print explains to you how it is that you squeeze quality out of the negative. And I kind of see it the same way with digital, except that now we don't have a negative, we have a raw image or a JPEG that was captured in camera, and we have the edit, the final edit, which is now the print. And fortunately for us, since 1995, actually maybe a little before that, we have this wonderful program, which is the digital darkroom, called Photoshop. I've been using Photoshop since 2003. 2003. I started with Photoshop, I think version 1. And they went through so many versions that now it's called CS, and it goes by year. But basically, it's the digital darkroom, and to me, Photoshop has been a game changer. It just allows you to do so much more. I used the darkroom for all the way from 1980 until the end, until 2000. Let me tell you, the darkroom was a pain in the neck. You had to deal with chemistry. You had to prepare the chemicals. You had to make sure the chemicals were at the proper temperature. You had to get in the darkroom. You had to poison yourself in there with all these fumes from the chemicals. So all of this stuff can now be done easily. Well, not easily, but fairly easily in the computer, and you can go back and edit and redo, and it's just so much simpler. So Photoshop has been liberating in its abilities compared to what one had to do in the darkroom. So I love Photoshop. I don't believe in creating images in Photoshop, and what I mean by that is I believe Photoshop is a great tool to take an image that is beautiful, excellent, and making it great. I don't believe Photoshop is a tool where you take a mediocre picture and make it decent. Having said that, everybody's definition of what something is adequate and great, that goes person by person. But I see myself as somebody who tries to do his best in the field to get a great capture and then bring it into Photoshop and make it into a great image that I can share with the world. And what that means in my mind is I basically call my images. I take a lot of images, but I will probably work on less than 1% of them, if that. And then once I take an image, I look at it, and I have a 10-15 minute rule, meaning my edit needs to be within 10 to 15 minutes. If something needs so much post processing that is going to take more than a 10-15 minute window, I'm likely to toss that image as being something that was not good enough to begin with. So yes, the short answer is I use Photoshop, and I'll use it, but I don't use it extensively. I don't believe in creating photographs in Photoshop. I believe in improving images that are very good and taking them from excellent to fantastic. And I hope that I'm achieving that. Okay, let me go back to the next question here. One second, please. Any thoughts about Tamron lenses from Robin Steiner? Robin, love Tamron lenses. I've used them extensively over the years. Back in the 80s and 90s, I absolutely loved their 90mm macro. It gave me some fantastic images. My biggest concern about independent lens makers, as I mentioned before, is compatibility into the future, especially with these cameras that are so very highly computerized and automated. If you can get a good deal on one and it fulfills your needs today, just have the thought in mind that you're not, with the independent lens makers, you're not guaranteed forward compatibility. None of them do that. None of them tell you this is going to work fine today and it's going to work fine in 5-10 years down the line. So you're saving some money for sure, but are you going to keep that investment if the cameras change radically in the future? With the manufacturers, I know Nikon and Canon and Sony have had the policy that if they sold you something that worked today, they are committing that as they release new models, that there is going to be an update path for that lens. And I don't think you get that from the independent lens makers. Now, the other thing that I've noticed specifically with Tamron, with their lenses, is I spend a lot of time in the wetland, and that means heat, that means humidity, that means sweat from my hands. And I have observed that after 3-4 years, the Tamron lenses don't look as good and don't hold up as well as the manufacturer lenses. So it's a little bit of that old saying that you get what you pay for. With the independent lens makers, you're going to have to deal with compatibility issues and also with what happens 4 or 5 years down the line. Now, your answer to me could be, hey, I don't care, I'm going to be upgrading by then anyways. So if you're pretty sure that you're going to keep upgrading, then the independent lens maker could be for you. But I, in general, today, am not recommending the independent lens makers on 2 grounds. Ground number 1, compatibility into the future. Ground number 2 is, are they going to hold up as well as a manufacturer-made lens? And I think the answer to that is no, they're not going to hold up as well. Next question, 1 second, please. Okay, someone's asking me about recommendations for the D500 on birds in flight. Have a couple answers there. If you're just starting out and you don't have a whole lot of experience framing and acquiring birds, my first recommendation for the D500 would be the fantastic Nikon 300mm PF. It's a tiny little lens, very fast focusing and extremely sharp. Love that lens. I just sold it to a student maybe a year ago or so. Miss it because it's such a great little lens. But that would be my recommendation if you're just starting out. If you're more advanced and you feel you can carry something a little heavier, the 200 to 500mm zoom that Nikon has made for their AFS cameras, cameras with the AF mount, is fantastic. No questions asked about that lens. It is, have no doubt, it's a fantastic piece. It's very sharp, it's very versatile, but the only thing is that being a zoom 5.6 is not the fastest aperture. So that may be a concern, but if you're doing normal light birds in flight, the 2 to 500 is fantastic. Now, if you think the 2 to 5 is not professional enough or is not going to give you the sharpness that you want, if you want just perfection and you want to have the very best of the best, the 500mm PF Nikon lens is a dream. It's a fantastic piece for bird photography. When I stopped using my D5, which was only a year ago, 3-4 months, the D5 with the 500mm lens is magic. The quality you get out of that combination is just awesome. It's a fantastic fast focusing lens. Unfortunately, it's not inexpensive. I believe I paid $3,500 for it or something like that. But from the performance point, is a fantastic piece. Okay, let me go back to the questions. Next one. Um, Lisa Nugent asked me about the Canon R5. The Canon R5 is basically an R6 with much higher resolution. Highly recommended camera. I have used it extensively. Nice camera, and with the 100 to 500 it marries very well. It's a dream kit. In fact, I've known some of the best shooters in the wetland use the R5, the Canon R5, and they get fantastic results. There is a wonderful photographer in our wetland. Her name is Catherine Bailey. She owns one of those, and I believe she uses the 100 500, and she gets just amazing images. I have no doubt about that kid. Let me go to the next one. One second. Lisa has also asked me, where do I find the bird tracking on the Canon R5? Yes, unfortunately, it's not turned on by default. You'll have to go into your menus. If you Google that very question that you just asked me, or you put it into YouTube, there's several manuals that will lead you exactly where in the menu you're going to find that. I wish I could remember it, but I don't use the R5 often enough to remember that. Lisa has also asked me if I use presets when editing. No, I do not. I'm not a believer in presets. Logically speaking, I have a problem with them. To me, each image I take is a work in itself, and so I don't know that I could have a cookie cutter approach to an image. The image has to be looking in its own merits. So I believe that always starting from zero on any given image I work on. Question, do I recommend aperture priority for dogs and cats? Yeah, for sure. I think you'll do very well for those because those little guys are very hyperactive and chasing them. Now, by the way, if you do have a camera that has the animal tracking, both my Sony and my Olympus do fantastic with mammals, so highly recommend. Eric Goss has asked me if in addition to Photoshop, I like to use other tools. And thank you for asking, Eric. That's a very good question. Yes, I definitely use other tools. As you know, the biggest one of the biggest things that we're fighting out there, or that I'm fighting out there, is because I like to use high ISO sometimes in low light conditions. Sometimes I have to mitigate noise. Noise is a big problem. For that, I love Topaz denoise. Now, sometimes, even though I think I have good technique, my sharpness may not be the best because I'm taking a picture in a very low light level and I may have a little bit of movement. Love Topaz Sharpen. I also find that to be an invaluable tool. The other tool that I've been playing with for a month and has been very fulfilling so far is, let me see the name so that I don't give it to you incorrectly. It's a product from DxO that I'm testing called DxO Pure Raw 2. By the way, all of these programs have demos that are fully usable so you can test them and see if they work for you. But the DxO Pure Raw 2 to me has been a game changer in the fact that it automates image cleanup and sharpening, and it does a fantastic job. In my opinion, it's groundbreaking and it's a fantastic product. Highly recommend that you download that demo and test it out. It's a 30-day demo and you don't have to pay any money for it for 30 days. I think as far as what it does the best cleanup and the best sharpening automated that I have seen in the market to date. I have had a couple pro friends point out a couple small issues with it. I'm not going to go into those because I don't want to prejudice you against it. I would say download it and judge it on your own terms and come to your own conclusion, but highly recommend it. DxO Prime, again, just to repeat the name, DxO Pure Raw 2. Highly recommend it. And by the way, I will be putting a link to that as well at the end of the presentation. Lori Barth is congratulating me on my Dragonfly. Thank you very much. 1 second. Let me go back to all the questions here. Sorry. One moment, I'm reading through all the questions and I'm trying to find ones that are relevant to this presentation. Okay, I think please, if I didn't answer a question, please shoot it again because I don't know that I'm actually able to see all of them. So many came in that it kept just updating. But since we have a few minutes left, I'm going to touch briefly on two topics that I didn't know if I was going to get to, but I see that I may have enough time. And they are actually a little bit higher level topics, but I think they're very relevant as far as improving your bird images in the field and making a big difference with no investment of money, only investing with your brain. And I think the number one thing that you need to pay attention to is what light is doing to your subject. And to me there, when you're starting out, definitely keep the sun behind you. That's easy glamour light, and the camera responds very well to it, and it's a light that will give you fantastic images. Light from behind you primarily emphasizes color. So if you're looking at something that is very colorful and you're keeping that light coming in from behind you, you're going to get fantastic color. Now, within that family of lights that come from behind you and that hit the subject from the front, there's one particular light that I'm enamored of, and I'm always looking for it if I can find it, but it only happens late in the day or early in the morning. And that type of light is called axis light, A-X-I-S, axis. And that is light that, imagine if the light was coming from your eyes, from the photographer's eyes, into the subject. Obviously that's impossible because we don't have a light bulb, at least I don't, in my head. So it's basically when the sun is really close to my head, behind me. In that sense, the light's hitting the subject very much directly, and my shadow is pointing directly at the subject. That axis light produces some of the best detail as well as some of the best color combination that you can get out there. Now also keep in mind that axis light also tends to come early in the day or late in the day when the sun is down in the sky. And that flavor of light can also do so much more for your photography, because at those hours of the day, the temperature of the light, the color of the light is different than when the sun goes up in the sky. So you'll see a lot of my pictures are taking sunrise and sunset, and that's because I'm a big believer that some of the most compelling light that will illuminate your subjects in the wetland will happen either early or late. Can you do photography in the middle of the day in the wetlands? Yes, for sure you can. And you can get some very beautiful photographs. But are you going to get a colorful sunset? No. And you're not going to get a colorful sunrise. So to me, if I can get there early or late, I'll definitely do that. If I can get there at all, I'll be there. But early in the morning, late in the afternoon, I prefer it even more. Besides that type of light, I think I already mentioned it before, any type of side light, including Rembrandt, brings out detail. So if I'm looking at a subject where that image lives from the detail, I'm always trying to place myself in such a way that the light comes from the side. So I actually, in my mind, I already know in the wetland what type of light is going to be in any given part of the wetland. So for example, keep in mind as you enter, for example, Green Cay, you're entering in from the west side. And as you're walking into that wetland, you're coming in from the west side, and you can either go north or go south. So immediately you know that if you're going to be there in the morning, say, and you're going to be walking north, the sun's coming up from the east, and so you're likely to get which? Well, you're going to have front light. The light's coming from behind you. So again, if you're in the morning and you just came into the wetland at Green Cay and you headed due north by taking a left, the light you're going to get there is from the back. So anything in that water in there is going to get some of that beautiful morning light coming right from behind you. You may get that axis light. Now, if you don't want that light, if you want shade, then you go there in the afternoon, because in the afternoon the sun will have shifted to the other side. So pay attention to what light is doing. And my number one recommendation is, if you have not been to the wetlands for sunrise and sunset, get out there for sunrise and sunset. You're going to see some magic. The wetland looks absolutely beautiful at those hours. The next thing that I want to talk about a little bit is, besides the light, is composition. Composition means where do you put your subject and what do you have together with your subject to elevate your subject. Now to me, most pictures, and you'll see this when you look at my work online, we're talking in bird photography primarily about portraits of birds and a background. Now to me, when we're talking about a subject and a background, it's very much a duality, meaning I don't know if you folks are familiar with the principle of yin yang, which is from the Far East, and is that circle that is half white and half black. And to me, the yin yang concept is very important in photography in the sense that one needs to balance the subject to his background. Now, I don't mean to say that you have to eliminate the background. No, not at all. I mean to say that the background needs to somehow complement that subject that you're trying to elevate. So I'm looking for backgrounds that somehow complement the subject. And obviously, I'm not looking for the opposite. The last thing I want behind my bird is a busy, unflattering background. Let me give you examples of both so that you know some of my pet peeves and what I'm looking for. I was in the wetland a couple weeks ago, running to a couple friends, and we were there at sunset on the north end of Green Cay, right by the northwest berm. And there were clouds to the west as the sun was setting, and I could see the colors start to build up. And it was going to be a reddish sunset because of the clouds to the west. But looking east towards the sea, I could see some clouds, and the clouds towards the east were picking up the color, the reddish color that was happening towards the west. And so in my mind, I immediately thought, wow, those clouds are starting to look pinkish. Any bird in front of those clouds is going to have a nice reddish color behind, a nice pinkish color. And I started thinking, okay, and those clouds are reflecting also in the water below. So any bird that happens to be down below, now I have the potential, possibly, of having a pinkish background, whether he's below or above. Now, as we were there, I was there with Dan Feddock and Margaret Ward. As we were there, a couple of roseates, spoonbills, flew in. And all of a sudden, in my head, I thought, oh my God, I'm looking at a pink bird, and there's the pink cloud. And I was like in my mind, at that moment when I visualized it, I said, it's not together. The cloud's over there, the bird's over there. But I could clearly see that the cloud was heading up north, and that at some point, the cloud was going to go behind the bird. And immediately I was like, oh my God, this is a great opportunity. I get a pink bird with a pink cloud. And sure enough, I stood there for a few minutes, I had patience, and it happened. And we got a series of pictures. Dan got them as well. Margaret got a few as well. And it was fantastic. It was a beautiful thing. And it is that sort of thing that you're looking for. You're looking for those moments of magical light. And yes, magical light, a lot of it tends to happen early in the day, late in the day. And then there was the ideal composition, you know, the stick coming out, bird on the stick, beautiful cloud right behind him. So there you have a case where you have a background that totally elevated that subject. Would the subject have looked good with another background? Yeah, for sure. You could have had a blue cloud. You could have had just clouds. You could have had any number of things happening in the back. But in my mind, a pink cloud behind a pink bird, it's just a party. It's just beautiful. So to me, if you compare a subject that takes a background that takes a subject and elevates it, that's what it's all about. That's something that you want to do. And that takes me back a little bit to, as a segue into the lenses. That's one of the wonderful things about these fixed lenses with big apertures. When you have a big aperture, you get to blur out the background. And so automatically you get your background to be toned down compared to your subject. And automatically by having faster lenses, and when I say fast, I mean lenses that open up to f4, f2.8, by having those friendlier backgrounds, that automatically will elevate your subject and push it forward. I would say the biggest thing that I would caution you about in the wetland, as far as backgrounds and as far as composition, is be very, very careful with sticky, busy, bright backgrounds. To me, when I see 1,000 little lines going up, which by the way is very common in the wetland, I have a name for that, and actually it's not my name. A teacher coined that name and gave it to me. That is called stickville. Stickville, meaning a whole bunch of sticks going up and forth. Well, there's nothing stronger compositionally than a repeating pattern that is bright and goes dark light, dark light, dark light. So anytime you put stickville behind a bird, well, good luck to you. You basically have put the busiest, most destructive background behind a bird. So to me, almost no bird survives stickville. Stickville is highly destructive. So literally, I have big areas of the wetland that I consider to be stickville. And if it's stickville, unless I'm going to be able to do a close-up of a bird, I'm not going to go hunting in stickville, because stickville is likely to yield underwhelming images because the backgrounds are going to be so very challenging. So I'm always looking for friendly. And by the way, some of this, unfortunately, you're not going to see this right away. You're going to have to fail, meaning take the bad backgrounds, then later think, oh, what did I do wrong? Okay, it's the background. And then you learn, okay, in that area, I'm always challenged. Maybe I want to hunt in better areas. And keep in mind that initially, as you're learning this craft, one spends a lot of time in bad areas. And the time that you spend in bad areas, unfortunately, is the time that you could have spent in good areas. So one of the things that you need to learn is where you need to be, because being in the wrong place will probably yield you bad work. I don't remember, there's a very famous photographer, I don't remember who he was, but a very famous photographer said that the most important skill for a photographer to develop was knowing where to stand. That's simple, just knowing where to stand. And that also begets the question that in order to know where you need to stand, you also need to know where you don't need to be. And so mastering that little concept of where it is that I'm going to be the most productive, that's where it's going to yield you the most pictures. And yes, when I walk the wetland, be it Grenke or Waco, I have my preferred hunting areas, meaning areas where I know I'm likely to encounter beautiful birds. Okay? So as far as composition, make sure the background's clean. The other thing, I'm very much a classic composer in the sense of principle of thirds. Again, no rules. It's not the rule of thirds. It's the principle of thirds. And basically what that means is that your subject probably, unless it's something perfectly symmetrical, ought not to be in the middle. So for example, this that we're doing right here is totally wrong. It should not be in the middle. Subject should be to the side. Now with a talking head, it's a little different, but if you're doing a bird, he typically either belongs on the right third or the left third. So always try compositions where you're pushing your subject away from the middle. And the other thing to me that is very important is the dynamic of the image, meaning whatever is in the front or in the back should somehow psychologically suggest to the viewer that the viewer ought to be looking to the subject. So for example, if you have any line or anything that is taking you into the subject, that's a helpful thing. Now, if you have lines that are going away or bisecting the subject, that really is not an ideal thing. You need to have the branch that goes towards the bird, not the branch that cuts the bird's head off. So it's looking at those little details that will improve your photograph. So principle of thirds is important. Also balance, meaning if you have an image, we're talking about a rectangle, not all the strength needs to be on the left or on the right. You need to somehow fill that frame with elements on the right that balance with things on the left. And when I'm saying about balance, I'm not saying that it's like a scale and if you put 5 here, you need to put 5 over there. Or if you put 1 egret here, you need to put an egret there. No. Balance means if I have a shape on this side that is very heavy, I need to have perhaps 2 medium shapes on the other side that are less heavy and somehow balance. So it's always about playing with the elements so that the image at the end of the day looks balanced. It is not about creating static images. Also, color is very important. To me, color oppositions can be very helpful to your image. And what I mean by that, if I have a bird that is warm tone, he could be fantastic against cool tones, because now we're playing with that dynamic of warm color, cool background. Or the opposite, a bird that has a warm tone against a background that is cool, that will push him forward. So all those little artistic elements are very, very important. And then the last thought that I want you to think of is one from my other very admired photographer that I love and that I studied forever. Please look at his work. He's fantastic. His name was Henri Cartier-Bresson. Henri Cartier-Bresson is the father of modern photojournalism. Now, Henri Cartier-Bresson was born a lucky man. The reason why I say that is because of that name you see right there, Cartier. He was a member of that famous family, jewelers, and so he was able to spend a whole lot of his life not having to worry about making a living, and he could actually just go out there and capture the world and see beauty and share that beauty with us. And he did that. He probably could have sat in Paris going to cafes with pretty girls. He didn't do that. He explored the world, and he did some of the best work out there. And what I find magical about Henri Cartier-Bresson is that he mostly focused, most of his work is not like Ansel Adams, where you're talking about technical quality and just perfection of an image. It's more about the magic of a moment. And there's one key description of his work, a term that has outlasted the man, and it's called capturing the decisive moment. That's what Cartier-Bresson was about. He was about taking pictures that were elevated because when he took them, something very special was happening. In fact, let me just share. This is his early work. I'll share just one, but there's so many of them because he was so good at this, where he would just pick on a moment where something very special was happening, and the picture is just magic. The title of this picture is Behind the Gare Saint-Lazare in Paris, and it's from 1932. And here's the image. It's a very, very famous image. And as you can see, it has been raining a lot and there's puddles. And folks are trying to get past this area without getting wet. And they're having to jump. So please be very, take a look very careful at this image. Notice that this pudgy guy looks like me. He's trying to get not wet, and he is in the air at this precise moment. And in this image, you realize that this poor guy doesn't stand a chance. He's going to get wet. He's not going to make it past that puddle. So it's that exquisite sense of timing. Keep in mind that Henri Cartier-Bresson did not have 50 frames per second. He had one frame. So this is a one shot. And it's not just wonderful that you get to see that this man is going to fail, but at this point, he's actually looking great. And notice in the wall in the back, there is a poster for a ballerina. And the ballerina in the wall is in exactly the same position as the man who is about to get wet. That is magic. That is that decisive moment. And one of the things that I'm looking for in the wetland is when those special moments are happening and I can actually capture something that folks have not seen before. When that happens, to me, that's magical. And that's one of my big goals when I go out there, that something special happened that I can hopefully photograph well and share with you folks here. This happened this past week. It happened for the first time ever. I was photographing in Green Cay, and there was a Halloween pennant, one of those beautiful dragonflies that are multicolored. And they're predators, so they hang out on a stick and they go out and they get their prey and they come back, and they're very fast about it. But they're not vegetarians. They're always looking for protein, and they go out, they fetch it, they catch it, they come back and they perch. And normally when he goes out and flies and gets his catch, they're very fast eaters. Most of the time when he comes back to the perch, you already see the little bug being devoured, but you don't get to see the bug. And in this one instance, this past weekend, I just published a picture. He gone a number of times, and this time I guess he must have read my mind, and he knew that I wanted to be able to see his prey. He actually caught a mosquito, came back, and the mosquito's still there, hanging, trapped, but hanging from. He's not in it yet, and he's giving me a smile. The dragonfly's giving me a smile, as saying, "Hey, look at what I caught. I'm gonna eat." And so to me, that's the magic of photography, that you can capture those special moments and share them with the world, hopefully in a pleasing way. So please, folks, just to end the presentation, number one, thank you so much for coming. I hope the class was informative and that I didn't digress too much, and that what I said made sense to you, and that it works to make your photography better, and that hopefully the setup that we did with Dave, and Dave, thank you so much for all the help. This obviously could not have happened without your help, and I hope that this worked out and that we get to do it again. And again, thank you folks for being online with me. It's been my pleasure. Thank you.